Welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone had a relaxing Pesach, if there is such a thing. Definitely quieter than most years. But the world must go on. At least we try for it to do that. So we're starting a new exciting sugya today. I'll share screen right away. Before we get to the Daf Makor, we have the Gemara itself. So we're starting a new Mishna. It's a very exciting Mishna. There's lots of stuff going on here. A lot of important Beitza stuff. So let's jump right in. The Mishnah states, Bayit shehu malei perot, v'nifchat, no tamimakom hapachat. The Tana Kama holds that if you have this house, a warehouse, a shed, whatever it is, but it's closed off, and it's malei perot, it's filled with fruits or whatever food item that you can imagine, v'nifchat, and all of a sudden it opens up, right? It was closed off and it now broke open. No tamimakom hapachat. You can go ahead and you can take the food item from the place of the opening. That is the opinion of the Tana Kama. Rashi fills us in here. V'nifchat me'elav. It opened up by itself, right? As opposed to somebody going ahead and breaking through the wall, through removing the bricks or what have you. We'll discuss why that is. That is the opinion of the Tana Kama. We'll continue with the main Rashi here in a second. I just want to finish off the Mishna inside. Rabbi Meir Omer, Af pochet lechatchila v'notel. Rabbi Meir says you can even go ahead and you can make the opening. You can remove these bricks a priori lechatchila on Yom Tov. Okay, so what exactly is going on here? Let's jump into Rashi. Rashi says, "No tell me makom hapachat v'lo amrinan muksa machmat iserhein de'en yochol lefchato biyom tov ba'asech da'ato minayhu kevan de lo have pachitato isur daraita kedukminan ba'avir de livni lav muksanehu." So we're going to get to the Gemara what Rashi is referring to, but Rashi tells us, Rashi is saying, the issue here is muksa, according to the Tana Kama. What would you have thought? I can't go ahead and get these bricks. I can't get this food item on Yom Tov, at least during Ben Hashmashot, because it's closed off. It broke open on Yom Tov, now became available. So I might have thought that the fruit is muksa, because there was a siach da'ato, he was hesach hadat, his mind was removed from these fruits during Ben Hashmashot. And since he had Hesach Hadat during Ben Hashmashot, therefore the fruit now becomes muksa for the rest of Yom Tov. If the reason for the muksa is now removed, namely, now you can get to the fruit, there's no longer a wall there. Nonetheless, you might have thought that the muksa remains, like in other categories of muksa, which we'll talk about. But says Rashi, no, here that's not the case. That's the chiddush of the Tana Kama, that the fruit itself is not muksa. Why? We'll get to. But before we finish the end of Rashi, I actually want to see the Gemara inside, which he's making reference to. Okay. So let's start the Gemara. We'll read the first few lines of the Gemara. We'll come back to Rashi. You know what? Let's do it differently. We'll just say what the Gemara is about to say, and we'll put Rashi. Why is there no issue of muksa here? Because making the opening on Yom Tov, there's no Isser Doraita involved. Why not? Because the Gemara we're about to see is going to go ahead and make an ukimta and establish that the case that we're talking about is Avira de Livni, which are basically, there are bricks that are stacked one on top of the other without any cement. As Rashi here says, Ba'avir de Livni, Sudur shel avanim belotit. There's no mud between them, they're just stacked. It's a binyan arai, and therefore there's no isur d'oraita of stira. There's no stira d'oraita to go ahead and remove them on Yom Tov. So since it's not an isur d'oraita to go ahead and remove them, lav muksa ninu. Therefore the fruits are not going to be muksa. K'da amar gabi tevel b'shehi parkinan shehu muchan etzel Shabbat shem avar v'tiknu mitukan. What's Rashi's proof that if you're only that the fruit's not going to be prohibited because of muksa? As later on in our parak, which we'll get to, that if somebody went ahead, you have tevel, you have fruit that there was no truma or meiser taken off of it. So there's an isur derabanan to go ahead and, as we know from earlier in the Masechet, there's an isur derabanan to go ahead and to take off truma and meiser on Shabbat or Yom Tov because of tikkun mana. It's only an isur derabanan. But if somebody went ahead and did that, they were over and they did that isur derabanan, so nonetheless the food would still be edible. I would have thought, what do you mean? It's tevel during Ben Hashmashos. You weren't allowed to eat it. It's hesach hadat. It's muksa. Kamash malan, says Rashi, since it's an isur derabanan, since what's holding you back is only an isur derabanan, once that's removed, there's not going to be any problem of muksa on the food item. So too, just by tevel, since it's an isur derabanan and the muksa doesn't stay on the food once the isur is removed, so too here, once the issue of removing the bricks, which is only Nisr Derabanan according to the Gemara, is removed, the food itself is not going to be muksa.
So muksa mishum Isr Derabanan is not muksa. Only mishum Isr Deraita.
Right. Meaning, had our bricks been with cement in between, and it had been a bona fide structure, and there would have been an Isr Deraita of stira to go ahead and take it down. So then, according to Rashi, the fruit would have been muksa. So and then that wall breaks, and you're able to get to the fruit. You can't touch it; it's muksa. So Rashi is making a distinction between whether it's an isur derabanan or isur deraita, which is the monea that's holding me back from being able to access the fruit.
Okay, but if Rashi's correct in what he's saying, then why would you not be allowed? Why is it only Rabbi Meir that says you could pull the wall down and not the Rabbanan? Because there's no Isur.
There's still an Isur Derabanan.
So if you need the food, the Isur Derabanan to actually pull the wall down, you can't do, but the fruit itself you can eat.
Yes.
And Rabbi Meir says there is no Isur Derabanan.
So, right, there's two things here. I discussed the opinion of the Tanna Kama and the opinion of Rabbi Meir. According to the Tanna Kama, according to everybody, we're dealing with a case of an Isur Derabanan of stira, right? According to the Rabbanan, you can't touch this wall, but if it breaks down, you could touch the fruit, they're not muksa. According to Rabbi Meir, you can even go ahead and remove the bricks and transgress this Isur Derabanan in order to go ahead and take the fruit. Why that is, so we'll have to see Rav Meir's opinion. Okay. Well, we're not done with this Rashi. But in order to understand it, let's start the Gemara a little bit. So the Gemara says, "Amai." Why? I always find it interesting how the Gemara usually loves to start off with a question without actually telling me what the question is. Right? I'll throw in Amai. Why? Why what? Why what? V'haka satar ahala. How could it be? Are you not going ahead and doing stira on the tent, on this bayit shemalei perot? So Amar Rav Nechumi bar Ada Amar Shmuel ba'avir delivni. No, we're dealing with, as we already explained, we're dealing with the bricks that are laid without the cement, and therefore there's no Isur D'oraita. Says the Gemara, Imi, really? That's going to be enough to make it mutter? Va'amar Rav Nachman, Hani livni di'itor mivninan shari litatunehu bishafta hol v'chazi lenizga alayhu. Rav Nachman said, you have these bricks that are left over from building. They're just lying around. Shari litalteinu, you can go ahead and you can move them on Shabbat. Hol v'chazi lemazga alayhu. Because you can go ahead and you can sit on them, so they're considered like they're usable. There was no hesach hadat, and therefore they're not muksa. You can go ahead and move them. Sorry, I lost the place. Sharginahu vada aksinahu. But if you go ahead and you stack them, you set them aside and you stack them in a certain way, which shows that you're using them still for binyan, either in the future or now, vada aksinahu, then it's going to be muksa. So what's the question here? Why should it be allowed to go ahead and take and move these bricks? Well, I shouldn't say that. What's the question here? Why should whatever be allowed? I'm going to be careful what I say here. Why should whatever be allowed? Are these bricks not still muksa?
But on who are you at? The original cases, they fell dead on their own. And then you're just going through the opening and removing the fruit. So on the Rabbanan, there's no question. It's only a question of Rabbi Meir, who says you could actually remove them.
Okay, excellent. So I was asking the Amai. Who is the Amai on? Is it on the Tanakama or is it on Rabbi Meir? Right.
Yeah,
so why? So you want to say that it's only on Rabbi Meir because?
Because he's actually removing it. The case of Tanakamas, they're falling dead on their own.
Okay. Why do you assume that's talking about removing it? There's another ramification to the fact that you have the malacha of stira here, which Rashi already dealt with. What's that ramification? That the fruit would be muksa, perhaps. Right? If I have an isser to go ahead and I can't get to the fruit, there's a malacha deoraita which is stopping me from being able to get to the fruit. So it should be muksa. So one could read the Gemara, Amai. Why? Bein Rabbi Meir, Bein Rabbi Meir, Bein the Tanakama, am I allowed to go ahead and take this fruit? Hakasatar ahala. There's an issue to go ahead and do stira to get to, a malacha of stira to get to these fruit, and therefore the fruit should be muksa. It's a possible read. I'm not saying it's the simplest read, but it's a possible read, and we'll see there are Rishonim who suggest this type of read. We'll read both of them in now. Okay. Let's read it. Let's read it how Howard wants to read it in terms of Rabbi Meir. Okay. Let's start with Rabbi Meir, which I think is the simpler read. Amai, why are you allowed? Why does Rabbi Meir say af pochet l'chachilo, that you can go ahead and you can even make a hole in this wall? Hakasatar ola. It's stira. You're doing a malacha. Says the Gemara. No avir delivni. Sorry. Avir delivni. It's only an isser. There's no isser deoraita. It's avir delivni, assumingly only an isser derabanan. Although the Gemara doesn't say that explicitly, and one could suggest there's no isser at all. But let's assume the simple shot that we're doing.
According to Rabbi Meir, how could there be an isser derabanan? He says you can take down the brick. He must hold. There's no isser derabanan. No isser period.
So the two options are that Rabbi Meir holds there's no isser whatsoever. Right? Avir delivni, there is no isser derabanan for whatever reason. We would have to figure out why. Or there is an isser derabanan. Ubecholzo, Rabbi Meir says that it's mutter. You're allowed to do it. Go ahead and transgress an isser derabanan on Yom Tov to take the fruit. Two viable options. And
you mean for food because it's food or something? Is that? Because
it's food. We would have to figure out why is it mutter? Is it because of ochel nefesh? Is it because of simchas Yom Tov? What exactly is he going to go ahead and allow this isser derabanan for? If there is still an isser derabanan here. All right, both viable options. The Gemara doesn't actually say what avir delivni, what would be if it's an isser derabanan or mutter gomer. So I'll leave that as open-ended right now. Okay, so again, why, according to Rabbi Meir, why are you allowed to go ahead and remove it? There's an isser deraita of stira. No, it's avir delivni. Really, ini, it's still going to be mutter. Ba'amar of Nachman, these stones are going to be muksa because they're stacked. Sharginahu v'adayaksinahu. If you go ahead and you have them stacked, so then that's muksa. And therefore, what's the problem? Therefore, you can't move the stones, right? You can't take them down.
But that's just another issue to Rabbanan. Why would that stop Rabbi Meir?
What's the issue if they're stacked? The cuts that you didn't have intention to use them on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Is that why?
Right. If you put them aside, if you stack them aside, so
that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. So if they're stacked in a certain way, that shows that they're set aside for something, set aside for use. So whether set aside in a nice neat pile, which shows that you're going to use them for a building, or they're stacked in a wall formation, which shows they're set aside for a wall. In either situation, they would be that would show that it was a hesach hadat and they would be muksa. So now these stones are muksa, and therefore we're assuming it's still a problem on Rabbi Meir. Why should he be allowed to go ahead and what?
And move the stones.
Take down.
Yeah. So let's assume that and move the stones. So just a question on that. If there was still an Isser Derabanan of Livni on Livni, sorry, not on that, on Avir de Livni. If there was still an Isser Derabanan of Stira, and the Gemara assumes that what? That we can push off the Isser Derabanan for the food, so then why is the Gemara now asking about Muksa?
Maybe you can't push off 2 Isirei Derabanan. Maybe you can only push off 1.
Okay, excellent. That's one option. One option is that we have, one Derabanan will push off, but not 2. If I have Stira Derabanan and Muksa, whoa, hands off. You can't do that. That's one option. What's another option? I see 3 options here. That was one. What's another option?
Maybe in Yom Tov you're allowed to do that because of Simchas Yom Tov or Achila or Eichel. Even with 2 of them.
So Simchas Yom Tov or Ochel Nefesh is going to push off.
Both things.
But the Gemara is asking now about, it's asking about Muksa. It's saying, hey, 1 second, isn't this Muksa? Now our question is, what do you mean? You just said it was mutter for Stira Derabanan. Why do you now care about Muksa?
So maybe Simchas Yom Tov doesn't push off Muksa. Maybe it only puts off.
Excellent. Okay, excellent. So option number 2 is that there's a difference between a Malacha Derabanan or this type of Malacha Derabanan and Muksa. That the Gemara has no problem for Rabbi Meir to say Simchas Yom Tov or Ochel Nefesh is going to push off this Isser Derabanan of Malacha, but it's not going to push off Muksa for whatever reason. Muksa might be, right, we're dealing with 2 different types of Isser Derabanan, Muksa versus Malacha Derabanan, and so perhaps we can say that there's a difference. And the third option, which was already, I'll just say it out because it was already suggested, is that Avir de Livni, there is no Isser Derabanan. For whatever reason, it's mutter, there is no Isser Derabanan of Stira, and therefore only with Muksa are we asking it because there was no Isser Derabanan beforehand to even ask the question on. Whichever route you take, the Gemara that goes ahead and answers, Amar Rabbi Zera b'Yom Tov Amru, aval lo b'Shabbat, Eina Chanami. To go ahead and, what Rabbi Meir's statement, to go ahead and remove these bricks, he would never allow that on Shabbat. It was just on Yom Tov. Why? Why Yom Tov?
Is that on Stira or on Muksa?
Also, excellent question.
Both. And why does Rashi not mention Stira? He just mentions Muksa.
All excellent questions. All excellent questions. We're going to come all back to this. Excellent. So right now, let's. It would all depend on how you were reading every single stage of this Gemara. So we'd have to have like a huge flow chart and like list. Well, if we're saying this, then that. Let's assume that it's talking about Muksa or Stira. Why would Yom Tov be Mekel? Why would Rabbi Meir be more lenient with Yom Tov to go ahead and allow the transgression and not on Shabbat?
Ochel Nefesh.
Ochel Nefesh.
Ochel Nefesh, yeah.
Ochel Nefesh. And now last line, Tananami Hachi, and we've also taught in a Beitza which supports this read of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir Omer, Af Poche Lechatchila V'Notel B'Yom Tov. Sorry, V'Notel B'Yom Tov Amru Aval Lo B'Shabbat. Rabbi Meir says you can go ahead and do this Lechatchila, but on Yom Tov and not on Shabbat. Full stop. Okay.
How come nobody mentions Chesar and Kiss here?
They do. Why do you say that? Meaning, where are you coming from? Chesar and Kiss?
Well, when it says Nifachat, what is it? Is it the wall that broke out, but the fruit is still, is it going to be destroyed or not going to be destroyed?
No, the fruit's not going to, whatever the food item is not getting destroyed by the break in the wall.
So why would Ochel Nefesh supersede? Because presumably they have more than enough food. They don't need that fruit, right? Because they didn't count on it.
Oh, that's interesting. You're saying if they came into Yom Tov and they didn't have this food in the first place, so why all of a sudden is there Simchas Yom Tov? Like, who cares? It wasn't on the menu.
Yeah, well, presumably they were already Yotzev and Simchas Yom Tov with what they had.
That's an interesting question.
Unless the fruit's going to be spoiled, maybe it was a wall that was like a cold storage.
Right. It could be something like that. We've seen similar cases in terms of if an animal falls into a pit right? You're allowed to do harama.
Right.
To go ahead and put it out. You weren't going to eat the animal anyways, but now all of a sudden, because the animals now you're gonna lose money, or the animals, right? It could be that.
But then you go back to why he doesn't mention Chassaras kiss.
Right. So there are a lot of questions on this Gemara. First glance,
You could argue that they had other fruit, but they spoiled. You could argue that guests came over they didn't anticipate. I mean, I don't know if you could say, well, they weren't thinking of you. You know, they already had their simplest yom to put away. Sometimes things change.
also, right? The whole Hoel is based on is based on guest. The guest might come. I was actually very excited. One Sukkot, we were able to mekayim the din of Hoel. I was staying at my brother's house. Me and all our families. There was a lot of people, and our sukkah just collapsed on Chag. We were walking the streets, and the neighbor invited us over. All of a sudden, 15 people came over, and they cooked the whole meal on Yom Tov. That was from the freezer, taking in all the stuff. It was a din of Hoel. So you never know what might happen. In any event, let's go back to the beginning of the Gemara and try to take this down. The question is, Amai. Amai what? What exactly is being asked? So one way of reading it, how we tried, is it's on Rabbi Meir. Right? There are indications for this. What are the two? I see two main indications that the question is only on Rabbi Meir. Now that we got to the end of the Gemara, I think hopefully it'll be a little bit clearer.
Yeah, because you brought Rabbi Meir in the end to show as a proof for the whole thing. So
right. Number one, the end of the Gemara brings Rabbi Meir as a proof. So why are you mentioning Rabbi Meir if the question's on the Tanakama? That's number one. Number two, which is not as strong, the v'haka sater ahala. Aren't you doing stira? Seemingly, the question would be on Rabbi Meir. But let's see. Let me share. Let us go to the source sheet. So the Meiri presents another option, which is interesting. Amar Meiri, Mishna Chamishi, v'akavana leva'er ba sheyesh dvarim domim lemuksa v'lo ne'esar v'amar al zeh bayit malei pera shehu satum. Rotzeh lamar she'ein sham petach likanes bo v'haya lanu lamar me'achar shechein huksa min hadat. Right, the Mishnah here is talking about different types of muksa where there might be muksa, you might have thought there's muksa. So what's our case? A bayit malei pera, and it's closed. There's no opening. Because you can't access it, I would have thought huksa midato. The nifchat me'elav the Yom Tov, and it opened up by itself. However, on Yom Tov, be'eze makom shabo, no tomi makom hapachad, and you take it out from the place where it's open. V'shalu b'gamar b'hakasatar Allah. Are you not? Isn't there an issue of stira on the oil? Klomar, the kasakal datai shehu satum the binyan ha'asur the storo min Torah isur gamor. V'imkein harei huksa machmat stira Allah. Sharei ulu ratzah litol mehem kodem shenifchat eno yachol litol below stira Allah. Says the Meiri that because there's a stira, because there's an issue of isser of stira, mina Torah, isser gamor, I would have thought, imkein harei huksa machmat stira Allah. It's now these fruit are out of sight, out of mind, because I can't get to them. Had I wanted to take them, either I would have opened an opening. The fact that I leave it closed shows that I'm not interested in these fruits. And the Gemara answers, no, we're not dealing with a real stira issue here. It's just the bricks one on top of another with no mud. There's only stira of dirabanan. And we've already explained, he says that if you're only talking about Isser Durabanan, once the Isser Durabanan is removed, so then whatever is left is now permissible. Ve'ein bo den muksa ba'ochlin, and there's no muksa ba'ochlin, ein pochten l'chachila. You can't go ahead and do it l'chachila. V'rameir omer, a pochet l'chachila, she'ein kan Isser Gamor, af midivrei sofrim. Ela srach Isser machmat muksa. So here he says what? According to Rabbi Meir, he says pochid l'chachila because there's not even isur derabanan. Not even isur derabanan. The only issue here is muksa, and therefore, if you of the stones, and that how the Gemara answers that Yom Tov will push off that isur. Okay. The yesh meforshim shelo shalu beGemara hakas satar Allah el Rabbi Meir. Perhaps the question of Amai is only on Rabbi Meir shehitir lechot lechachila v'da'atohu she'amidu b'shurot shel levanim aval ledat chachamim kol shenivchat afilu b'vinyan gamor notu b'makom ha'pachad v'nira atam. Right. So he brings he brings that a yesh meforshim. I think this is the simpler read of the Gemara that the Amai is only on Rabbi Meir. So the two interesting things I see in the Meiri is number one, that he brings a deya that the Amai is on the Tanakama as well. He reads that into the Gemara. And number two, that according to that read, there is no Isur Durabanan, even an Isur Durabanan, to go ahead for a Meir to open the wall.
Okay. The nafkamina on that read is according to Tanakama, if it was an actual with plaster and it breaks. Because this is saying that people always have their mind on the fruit. So that the concept of it being just the bricks without the plaster is only according to Rabbi Meir. And you may be able to say that for the Rabbanan, even if it has bricks and it breaks on its own, the fruit would be permissible.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. You're saying if Rabbi Meir is going to allow you to remove the bricks that are derabanan, then he would allow you to take the fruit, which is derabanan as well.
Okay, that's right. But I'm saying the rabbis.
And the rabbis would not. The only reason that I would take the fruit is because they hold it's not muksa. Had the fruit been muksa according to the Tanakama, you wouldn't be allowed to eat it.
Right. So if the structure even had plaster and fell down on its own accord, the rabbis would permit the fruit.
No,
Rabbi Meir. You mean Rabbi Meir?
No, I'm talking about I'm talking according to Rabbanan. If we're saying that the Amai is on Rabbi Meir, and the answer on the Amai that it's the Livni, that's the bricks that doesn't have the plaster, is on Rabbi Meir, then we're able to look at the Tanakama as possibly saying that even if it's a proper structure and falls on its own, people always have in mind the fruit.
But not if it's muksa machmas isur deraita. This is the Rashi. Even the Meiri is saying the same thing.
What's isur deraita?
I don't see that as a nafkamina between them. I mean, either way. I'll say this. Either way, between both reads of the Meiri, according to the Tanakama, whatever het there is that Rameir is using to go ahead and push off muksa, right, whether it's ochel nefesh or simchas yom tov, whatever it is, he holds that.
I'm sorry. He actually even says it. He says, "Odat Chachamim kol sheniftach afilu b'vinyan hagamur." No tell me makom. The next couple lines, the Meiri actually says it.
Again, yesh mefarshim shelo shel beGemara shelo shel beGemara v'haka satar Allah el Rabbi Meir shetil lefchod lechatchila v'tohu she'amidu b'shurot shel anim aval adat chachamim kol shenivchat afilu b'vinyan gamor notu mimakom hapachat.
You could just be referring to muksa though.
Okay. You didn't have to take that leap of the Meiri. The Meiri, you don't have to take that. You can read the Gemara of Amai only on Rabbi Meir and not come to this conclusion. Let's read what the Meiri is saying now. I'll explain like this, and I'll explain why I don't think that you have to take that jump. Meiri is saying like this: if the question of Amai is only on Rabbi Meir, right? Rabbi Meir, why are you allowed to go ahead and move the bricks? And then he would say, according to the Chachamim, even if it was muksa d'oraita, I would still be allowed to go ahead and take the fruit.
No,
right?
He's not saying that according to Rabbi Meir. What he's saying is Rabbi Meir's case, where he says you can remove the bricks, is a case when there's no plaster.
Right.
Now he's saying, so that's Rabbi Meir's case. So now he's going back to the Chachamim, And he says on the Chachamim, even if it's in Binyan Hagamor, okay, he could take from it. Because you never, Sha'afal Pi Shabayit Sagur, Ein Adam Mikset Dato Mina Peirot, Ve'ein Muksa. So even the rabbis are saying that you never have Hesach Hadat on your fruit.
But he's not dealing with stira though. They're only dealing with muksa, but they'd still have an issue with stira, wouldn't they? It would be in Gomer.
No,
It's saying it did it on its own.
But it has a hole. But if it has a hole, then they're saying that the fruit has never becomes muksa. That's what they're saying, right?
Right.
And if it does have, but they say more than that. They say if it does have, but they're saying here that fruit never becomes muksa, right? So that means even if it has a wall around it that you can't get through because of the stira, not because of the fruit.
Yeah. But it's still,
So-
it's still a stira issue though, isn't it?
It doesn't, it doesn't jive as well.
And the way I see it is that he's saying if you say the Amai is only on Rabbi Meir, then the Kimta the Gemara makes that we're dealing with these shurot of stones is only according to Rabbi Meir. And the Reisha, the Tanakama statement would apply even if it was a binyan gamor, right? That's how I'm reading it.
Yes.
So I'll tell you my issues with that read. There's a couple of them. Number one is as such. You read the Mishnah. Who's Machmer and who's Mekel? Who's the more stringent opinion?
Chachamim.
Right? Chachamim. According to this read of the Meiri, who's more Machmer?
The Chachamim.
Oh, sorry. No.
It doesn't change.
It does
It means-
because it was a bit. If it was a binyan gamor, would Rabbi Meir allow you not to forget if it was a binyan gamor and then the wall fell? Okay, forget about making a hole lechatchila. Then the wall fell. Would Rabbi Meir allow you if it was a binyan gamor and then the wall fell to go ahead and take the fruit?
For sure.
No, maybe not. Maybe not.
Why? Why wouldn't he? If he says the fruit's not muksa no matter what, his is a mekel deya that says in the case where there is no plaster, you could even remove the bricks.
No, well,
But-
it's a Chachamim says there's no mix no matter what. The Chachamim said, right?
Rabbi Meir may say the same thing.
But it's
Why?
not the same. It's not the same level. Just because Rabbi Meir says you can go ahead and you can remove a brick that doesn't have any plaster, I don't think that necessarily means that he says you can go ahead and you can take a fruit that was behind the wall that had plaster. Because one's a malacha a muksa derabanan, and the other one that stems from the malacha there is what's the muksa there? The type of muksa there of the bricks would be
Plastic.
it would be I guess chesron kiss.
That's from Kiss.
Yeah.
Mr. Miss- I mean, the issue of removing the plaster, of stira for plastered bricks.
No,
That's
if they're not plastered. Rabbi Meir says if they're not plastered, you can go ahead and remove it, right? Because whatever the muksa is, the muksa of the bricks, you can go ahead and remove. You can go ahead and do that for the food, right?
But he's not saying that yet in the Mishnah. Is he, the Miri?
He's reading it back on the Mishnah.
Yeah, he doesn't say that yet.
I mean, the Rabbi Meir and the Tanakama are on the Mishnah. Yeah. Okay, fine. I'll leave that side because we can be thoughtful about that. But I'll ask the second question. You're telling me that the Mishnah is talking about two separate cases. The Tanakama is talking about a case of plaster, and the Rabbi Meir is talking about a case of rows of bricks without plaster, and it's in one Mishnah.
I'm saying it's a possibility.
I'm saying I'm not you. By you, I mean the Meiri. I don't mean you, Howard. I mean the Meiri is telling me. Meiri, you're telling me that the Mishnah is dealing with. They're having an argument, but they're not having the same discussion. They're talking about two different cases. Talking about two different houses. I'm saying once the Gemara makes an ukimta for Rabbi Meir, why don't we apply the ukimtas on the entire Mishnah, not just on the statement of Rabbi Meir? No. I would assume.
Maybe what Meir, the second part of the Meiri, he's saying they're both talking about a situation where the bricks are stacked without plaster. And the Meiri says you can not only take it from the place where there's already the thing fell apart by itself in a certain area, but you can continue to remove it. The Chachamim say you can't continue to remove it. You can only take from the place where there's an opening. So they say, well, but aren't why can't you take away the bricks? Because there's some kind of isser. Rabbi Meir holds there's no isser to remove bricks that are stacked. The Chachamim feel there is an isser to remove bricks that are stacked. So it says the Meiri. So then why can you take it even from the opening, right? So he says even if you had a binyan gomer, even if it wasn't just stacked but it was plastered, the rabbis would always feel you could take it from the place of opening. So the difference between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Meir is in a case where the bricks are stacked, the rabbis say you could just stick your hand in the hole and take out the payload. Rabbi Meir says you can just pull all the bricks apart. And the rabbis would hold that even if the bricks were plastered together.
Oh, okay. That is what the Meir is. I think that is what the Meir is saying, but I don't think that's pshat of the. I don't think that's a simple pshat of the Mishnah. Nor, as he says at the end, v'chein nira dat gdolei hamachavrim she'aviu kipshuta. I don't think that's dat gdolei hamachavrim either. For example, that's not what Rashi says, right? Because according to the Meiri, if the Amai is only on Rabbi Meir, right? So then the Chachamim are saying you can even take the fruit if it's behind a plastered wall that fell. Rashi doesn't hold that. Rashi explicitly says that according to the Chachamim, the reason you're allowed to take the fruit and the reason they're not muksa is because there was only an Isser D'Rabbanan of stira. Had there been an Isser D'Oraita of stira, then it would have been huksa midato. Right? Yeah, Rashi's here again. The Yom Tov asach datu mine the came the lo have b'chitato isur deoraita kidok minan la ba'avir delivni ba'avir delivni. This is going on notam imakom apacha. That's going on the D'Rabbanan on the Tanakama on the Rabbanan. Rashi for sure is not reading like the Gesh Meforshim that the Meiri brings, even though he reads the Amai on Rabbi Meir.
According to the way Rashi understands it, with the Rabbanan, if the bricks were plastered together, even if there was a hole there, he couldn't put his hand in and take out the fruit.
Right, that's how Rashi would read. Yeah.
And the Meiri sees no. The Chachamim said even if it's plastered together, you could put your hand in it. You can't remove the bricks, but you can put your hand in.
I agree exactly. That's how I see the difference, and I don't think the Meiri's Yesh Meforshim is pshat of the Mishnah. I think it's a very difficult read. I don't know who the Gdat Gdolei Machavrim are.
But doesn't he have to come to that svora because of if the Amai is just on Reb Meir, and the whole stira thing is just related to Reb Meir, isn't it?
If the Amai is on Reb Meir, the stira thing's on Reb Meir. But I'm saying once the Gemara makes an ukimta of what Reb Meir is talking about in the Mishnah, what the case is talking about, so then the case is on everybody. I mean, look back at the Mishnah. Look back at the lashon of the Mishnah. Oops. I mean, it's a baichu malei perot v'nivchad no the makom avachad. Rabbi Meir omer af pochet l'chachila. They're talking about the same case. I don't understand how the Meiri can bring that they're talking about two separate cases. Very difficult. Okay.
I mean, the issue, they have to find a solution for Rabbi Meir, so it doesn't sound like he's actually saying that if you could expand a hole or that you could do stira, where you're mekalkel something on Yom Tov in order to get the food. So they've come up with a solution of saying that there was no plaster. But I mean, the difficulty is if you did the simple read, it would be that was a binyan that had plaster, that the Tanakama had a case where the wall broke down on its own. And a simple read is Rabbi Meir is saying in the same case where it's with plaster that he says you could even destroy it because you're actually destroying the binyan in order to get the fruit. And so on Yom Tov, that would possibly be permissible. The Gemara didn't like that, so they gave this other answer that there was no plaster.
Right, I agree.
But
But I'll even say this, to say that there's another point where I think Rashi is arguing with the Meiri. In the first opinion the Meiri brings, that the questions in everybody, he explains that according to Rabbi Meir, there's no Isser D'Rabbanan to go ahead and remove the bricks, even if they're just layered, right? He said, right, Rabbi Meir, af pochet l'chachila she'en kan Isser Gamor, af midvrei sofrim, ela srach Isser machmat muksa. Oh, just muksa. There's not even Isser D'Rabbanan. Rashi for sure says there's an Isser D'Rabbanan to remove the bricks. Right? Rashi makes that chiluk.
Where?
Rashi makes that chiluk. So this meiri all around is a little wonky. Although I do appreciate the analysis of the Amai.
Where does Rashi say that? He showed.
Here, Rashi, we read it inside, but here it is. I wrote it here also on the source sheet. Nota makom avacha v'lo amrina muksa machman iserhein. The fruit itself.
Right. The first Rashi. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Now, so let's discuss Rashi for a second. Let's discuss Rashi. All of the issues that we raised and the Amais and everything that will come back throughout. But according to Rashi, why? Why, if there's an Isser D'Rabbanan, all of a sudden it's not muksa? Who cares? In the end of the day, Ben Hashmashos, could I have gotten the fruit? No. I mean, we're rabbinic Jews. We keep rabbinic laws just like we keep D'Oraita laws. So I can't get the fruit. So isn't there Hesach Hadat? Why all of a sudden is the fruit now not muksa? Because it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. It sounds like Reform Judaism. What's going on here?
The question I have, can food ever be muksa? Food that's piled up in the place and stuff like that. In some way or another, there is some sense of that, right?
Can food? So maybe. I'll give you an example, okay, where I think Rashi would agree. Let's say I have a cake. I don't know, okay, and I decide before Shabbat that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my money, my wallet, and I'm going to rest it on the cake for whatever reason.
Okay.
The cake
All right.
is a basis l'davar asur.
Yeah, it's a basis for davar asur. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not the same. But that's not the same. It's a different type of muksa, right?
I mean, whatever I put on the cake, but I do appreciate the question that you have, because I'm brushing it off in a sense, but it's a better question that I'm giving it credit to, as we're going to see.
Okay.
Okay, so who cares that whether it's an Isser D'Oraita or Isser D'Rabbanan to go ahead and break the walls down? There's Hesach Hadat. Who cares? Why should they make a difference? What do you guys think?
Well, maybe when it came to Simchus Yantiv or Ochel Nefesh, the Rabbanan would vatal the Gzeira.
So why don't they do it? The muksa is going to be muksa D'Rabbanan in any case. So whether the steer is D'Oraita or D'Rabbanan, the muksa I can go ahead and I can push aside, even if the steer is D'Oraita.
Well, let's say, but if the steer is the Rabbanan, right? So the steer is Yisr Rabbanan. So do I have complete Hesef Dat before Yontif? Maybe the Rabbanan would be vatel their Gzeira of stira, of Yisr stira, for the sake of me having Simchus Yontif, so I don't have such a Hesef Dat.
The other question, again, it has to do with food. Is there such a thing as Hutzler das to certain food before Yom Tov, right? Or can you say, which I know certain thing, that you can, and certain things you are matter to use them even though you didn't have, you sort of put them on the side, like food maybe.
I mean, we could take. We just take the Rashi case of D'Oraita. If it was a plastered wall, so Rashi's saying I can't take the food. It's muksa. Right. So this gets into a little lumdus in the Achronim, which is not necessarily here, but it comes up a lot of places, and that's the nature of Isur D'Rabbanan. There's a famous Netivot in Shulchan Aruch at the very beginning of here. The case in the Shulchan Aruch is as such. Let's say I go ahead and I go ahead and I sell you a piece of meat for Chag, all right? And it's and I tell you it's glad kosher, it's great, all right? Mahadran and mahadran, and you pay me $100 for the piece of meat. And then you find out after Yom Tov, after you enjoyed your meal, that it was treif. And you could have bought the same thing at Costco for $20. So what happens? What happens with the sale? You bought it for 100, and now we find out that it was only worth 20 because it was treif. And I was machshel you, and you ate treif. God forbid. So it says the Shulchan Aruch as such. V'nodashi treifa, ma she'achlu achlu, v'yachzir lehem adamim, u'ma she'lo achlu, yachzir lo habasar, v'hu yachzir lo damim. It's basically a mekach ta'os. You thought you were buying kosher food. I gave you treif. The deal's off. I have to give back the money. You ate some of the food. I still got to give you back the money. Right? Whatever meat's left, you give me back, but you're going to get your money back in full. If let's say you got benefit from it in a certain way, there was monetary benefit, you sold it to another non-Jew for I don't know, $20. Any type of Isser D'Oraita that I sold you, that I told you was really kosher, I'm gonna have to pay you back. Now here's the interesting thing about if I sold you something and I told you it was kosher, but it was really asur midirabanan, if the fruit is still around, so you give me back the fruit, I give you back the money, deal was off. Let's say you already ate the fruit. If you ate it, you ate it. I don't give you back any money. Wow, why? What's the difference? I sold you treif. Even if you ate it, I got to give you back the money. I sold you something that was asur midirabanan. If you ate it, I don't have to give you back the money. So it says the Netivot, Beitza d'Rabbanan ein tzorich shum kapara v'ki'ilu avar dami. V'ki'ilu lo avar dami. I'll say it outside. The Netivot says as such. When you eat treif, so you ate treif. It's mitam temet alev. It defiles your soul. It does something to you. And so therefore, I have to give you back the money for selling you that treif cow because you didn't get any hana from that. In fact, you were damaged from that. It was awful. I sold you something that was, you're right, it was fine, but the rabbis came along and they said, don't eat it, and you ate it. B'shogeg. Didn't know. So, did you do anything wrong?
Isn't the over lo sasser?
Okay, if possibly listening to the rabbis are fair question. Putting that shita of the Rambam aside, are you actually over anything when you do a dirabanan b'shogeg? So says the Netiva, no, it's like you did nothing. You're in the clear. Why?
So when I say Tfilah Zachai on Erev Yom Kippur, it doesn't say Rabbanan also? I'm just wondering,
B'shogeg. Okay, so there's the kasha on the Netiva.
I'm just asking a question.
Right. You don't have to do. It says the Netiva. We have to change the nusach. Chanami.
Or the machlokas Rishon.
Yeah, there should be a footnote. It should be in parentheses. Leman da'amar. Right, and he brings proof. Amrina be'eruvin derabanan avdinan uvda v'hadar matvinan tiyuvda ve'ilu haya nenash ala shogeg heichaya manichin lo lavor v'lekabel onesh. Because it says we're not going to get into the Gemara. The Gemara basically says you have if somebody was over an Isser, if you have a question about Isser Derabanan, So you do it, and then afterwards you figure out the answer, as opposed to if it was a Doraita issue, so then you first figure it out, and then you do it. The proof is not so important. It's more a shita. There is no onesh on an Isser Durabanan if you do b'shogeg. It's like you eat kosher. Why? You got complete benefit from it. There's no mitam temetalev. He's got to pay for it all because he benefited from it. The klalahu the tzarich l'shalem kafi masha nene. Masha eno kain be'isur d'oraita shebekabel onesh ala shogeg v'chisarono gadol menato. You go ahead and you're over an isur d'oraita, so then you get an onesh for it. It's mitam temetalev. There's isur, and therefore he's not getting enough from eating the tray piece of meat. He's getting onesh, and therefore he doesn't have to pay for the hana. The people doesn't say it explicitly here, but what he's saying, another Achronim point this out, is that it's a difference between chefsa and gavra. If I have an iser treifa, I have a piece of meat that's not kosher, midioraita. So there's a chefsa of meat in front of me. The meat itself is treif. I eat it, so it's like I'm eating poison, physical poisons in my body. When it comes to an iser derabanan, says the Netivot and some other Achronim, not everyone agrees, but this is the Netivot's opinion, that if there's only an Isser Gavra, it's on the person. The rabbis, when they go ahead and implement some type of restriction, they can't change ontologically, they can't change the essence of an item. The item is what it is. All the rabbis can do is they can say, hey, you don't eat it. And therefore, when a person goes ahead and they eat it, and they b'mezid, so the Isser that they're doing is not listening to the rabbis. Right? Lo tasor, you're not listening to the rabbis. But let's say a person didn't know. It was b'shogeg. So are they not listening to the rabbis? They're not listening to the rabbis. They didn't know. Had they known, they would have listened to the rabbis. But it was b'shogeg. So in essence, says the Netivot, they didn't do anything.
How does that help our case? In our case, we're not talking about a shogeg. It's muktzah because
it's a rabbanan. No?
It's a rabbanan. I agree, but it's muktzah because he wouldn't do the mezi, take down the brick. Well, he's thinking maybe he'd do it to shogeg, and therefore he's still mezi far.
So you can apply this to Rashi. Why? Oh,
What's that?
Yeah. So exactly. So let's apply this to Rashi now with the doraitas and the derabanan. So if I go ahead and I removing the bricks, okay. So 1 second. Let's play this out. If I'm removing the bricks, I have an issur doraita to go ahead and remove the bricks. Right. So there's a chafza shel isser on the bricks.
So you're saying the mixed muktzah can't be from an issur rabbanan. You can't change the chef. You cannot make a change in the chefza of the fruit. The issur rabbanan is only on the bricks, but somehow it doesn't transform to make the fruit muktzah.
Yeah, in a sense, and we'll see. There are here. I'll jump to. Who says it explicitly? There's in the Ramban. I don't see it here now. When there's an Isser Derabanan, let's say there's only an Isser Derabanan, so you're not allowed to move the bricks. Why not? There's no chefza of stira here. The rabbi said don't do it. Is there really stira? No, there's no stira. Right? So the rabbi is saying not to do it. It's not just an issue of dot, that I have dot or not. It's whether there's actually some type of chefza, something like, is there an actual wall here or an invisible wall? I can say it like that. When there's an Isser D'Oraita, there's an actual wall here. There's a chefza of Isser in front of me that's stopping me from getting to the fruit. But if it's only an Isser D'Rabanan to remove the bricks, So there's no hefza of stira. There's no wall here. It's an imaginary wall that the rabbis made up. Midoraita, there is no wall here. Right? You can look at it that way.
The Tosfot seems to say that it says in the fourth line down that the muksa rabbanan lo amrin migo de gisar de bedashmat.
According to Rashi, right? Tosfot takes issue with Rashi, which plays into some of the distinction we're making. Tosfot, which we'll see probably not today, brings other cases, and he says, Rashi, I don't know what you're talking about. There are plenty of cases in which we have an Isser D'Rabbanan, which is going to go ahead, and answer something else, Mishum Muksa. Right? Let's take the case of I left my wallet on the cake. Moving the wallet's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's only because of Muksa. So if the wallet falls off, can I eat the cake? Absolutely not. It's a basis. So Tosa says, what's the difference between the wallet falling off of the cake versus the wall falling down? Both of them, there was an Isser D'Rabbanan. And in one case, I'm allowed to go ahead and eat the fruit. And in another case, I'm not allowed to eat the cake. Why? That's Tosa's issue. But we'll have to get into Tosa. Just to sum up where we're at now, as time is evading us. We saw Machloket Tanna Kama and Rabbi Meir. It's unclear exactly what the case is and what the heterim are involved. We saw the Meiri deal with the question of Amai. Is it on the Tanna Kama? Is it on the Rabbi Meir? And the implications, if it is on Rabbi Meir, how does that now fall back and read onto the Chachamim? We saw how Rashi clearly argues with some of the points that the Meiri makes in terms of both how to read the Gemara, how to read the Rabbi Meir, and how to read the Chachamim. And we dealt with Rashi. What type of distinction does Rashi have between Isser D'Oraita and Isser D'Rabbanan? Why should it make a difference? And a suggestion, we'll see other options next week, is that according to the Netivot, perhaps this would be a proof, help support him in his opinion, that when you have Isuri D'Rabbanan, the rabbis don't have the ability to go ahead and infuse an item with any particular Isser. They can only tell the Gavra, the person, you can't go ahead and do that. But the item will stay the same. And therefore, according to the Netivot, there is no Isser if you're Isser D'Rabbanan B'Shogeg. There's no Onish. Nothing happens. And perhaps that's the difference here, that the wall, if there's an Isser D'Oraita, there's an actual wall there, and therefore it's a lot more, I can't get to it, as opposed to if it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan to remove it, so it's like there's an invisible wall here, meaning halachically, there is no wall on the D'Oraita level. There is no wall here. It's just invisible bricks. Okay. Yeah.
Two things. One, on your cake with the wallet scenario, is that on Yom Tov or on Shabbat?
On Shabbat.
Right. So on Yom Tov, would it not be permissible? Like, I'm getting back to Gerard's point, where I don't think there's time that food itself that's ready food is muksa. Food that's not ready and takes a step to make it ready, yes, it's muksa. But food that is prepared and ready to eat, I'm not sure if there's a case where it's muksa.
Yeah, Beitza shenoda b'Yom Tov.
That is not okay. That's a case where we don't know the status. I'm talking about you have a ready-made cake in front of you, and it had a wallet on it. You tip the wallet off. Can you eat it on Yom Tov?
So I wasn't going to get into it now, but one of the questions that we need to ask is, from that first Gemara of Beitza shenoda b'Yom Tov, we see that on Yom Tov, we're actually more machmir with muksa, right?
But it's something that is a new status. You couldn't have had your mind on it.
Not just with nolad. In general, we're more machmir. Like the Gemara says, Paskin, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi formulated the Mishna in a way for Yom Tov that it follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and on Shabbat it follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So, just having to do with your question, but a little bit of a tangent. Why are we going to be, if the issue where the Gemara says, oh, Rabbi Meir is going to be Mekel on for Yom Tov, but not on Shabbat, if the issue is Muktzah, why is he Mekel on Yom Tov? He should be Machmer on Yom Tov.
But I'm saying, okay, I'll save it for next time because it'll take too much time. But the question that I have is Rabbi Meir holds that you can't have in mind something that may never come into this world. So Rabbi Meir, when it comes to fruit, when it comes to the egg, when it comes to different things, is you can't have dat on something that isn't here. Now, the fruit that's in that house, and Rabbi Meir is saying is permissible, means that the fruit is here and you have dat on it. It's not something that is not here. It's something that is, you have thought on it, and it's not muksa. Like there's no Indian of muksa on this whatsoever.
Okay, but my question is then, how do you explain the Tanakama? If it was according to
If you're
Rashi,
not holding it's muksa. In other words, Tanakama says that if the wall falls down, you can eat it.
according to Rashi, not if it's a plastered wall.
Okay, so you're asking how to explain Rashi. I understand the Miri, I understand the Rashba. It's Rashi I'm having difficulty with.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're saying that on Yom Tov, if there's food that's muchan, it's muchan. There is no muksa when it comes to prepared food.
Gerard said it. I'm giving credit to who said it, but I agree with Gerard.
Okay, fine. Okay, so we have a machloket now between Aaron Gerard and again Rashi on the other side, which is it's fine. Well, I'm not belittling that point. It's a
I'd
fair.
rather say with Meiri, Rashba, and Rashi on the other side.
after we took down the Erie, you want to bring them on your side? Okay, fine. I'll try
on the
to,
Rashba on the sheet, you have the little quote, but I suggest looking at the full Rashba.
well, I took out the rest. I did look at the rest, but I will do that as well. Maybe we'll bring it in. I see I'm not allowed to cut quotes now. I have to take all of it. All right.
It's I cheated. While we were doing this, I looked on Al HaTorah, so I was able to look up the whole thing.
Ah, okay. All right. Okay, Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue this discussion. I'll definitely think about that, and I'll try to bring sources for that as well. Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue next week. Everyone should stay healthy and be well.
Right.